Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Sorry for being late.
سلام الله الله يجعله خير. كيف صحتك؟
How are you? Hello, Dr. Salman. How are you? Hello.
How are you?
Fine, very well. Thank you.
Great.
How is Dr. Salman?
Well, doing well. Looking forward to the conversation.
Very good. Your face very similar to the former Prime Minister Shahid Khaqan Abbas.
I can assure you, we are not brothers. Someone else has mistaken that also.
Salman sahab, how is everything with you?
Are you asking me, sir?
And you have done good work on the food security.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for appreciating the work.
Yes, we are really grateful that you have agreed to present your good work on food security during pandemic. Nowadays, everybody is really worried about the food security because when everybody is locked into the room, into the home, then how we'll be able to get the food? That's the most important topic. And we are grateful that you have agreed to give the presentation on this one. And that will be open test all over of excellence. At the moment, there are 21 participants, and we are expecting that there will be about 30 in during the course of this presentation. And 21 plus 6 are here, 7 are here. Altogether, 28 participants are there. And after that, there will be a presentation from the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research in Palestine. They are our focal point, and they will be talking about science, technology, and innovation. Also during the course of COVID-19. And he is Engineer Samir Hussein or Samar Hussein. I don't know how to pronounce that one. And he is the Director General for Technical Education. Dr. Samar, are you there? Dr. Samar Musa?
Yes, sir, I can hear you. Samir Musa Hussein, yeah.
Samar Musa Hussein. Thank you very much for agreeing to present this very important one. And especially if it's coming from Palestine, that will be sort of lesson for other member countries. Thank you very much. So now over to Dr. Ali Salman. It's all up to you. And you have to tell us about the food security.
Thank you so much, dear colleagues. I think it is the first time that I am participating in your prestigious forum. It's a great pleasure and honor. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share my recent research on the subject. I would like to start with two disclaimers. My PhD is still in progress, so not yet a doctor. Hopefully end of this year sometime. Second is when I published the paper, this was essentially in the context of Pakistan. So the paper published talks about food security during the pandemic year, focusing on the situation in Pakistan. However, being a developing country, part of the Southern Bloc as we call it, I think there are similarities which can be useful for the audience of this session. And to that extent, I have added some points which reflect closely to the overall theme of South-South cooperation. So this will be essentially a build-up on my paper, food security in Pakistan, but then giving it a broader view and obviously then reflecting and focusing on the region in which Pakistan is located. Because normally food trade happens within the region whenever we talk about especially perishable goods like vegetables, fruits, normally they trade within the neighborhood. So that will be the focus of the presentation. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a few slides, and then we can hopefully have some time of discussion. How much time do I have, Farhan, for a presentation?
Mr. Ali Salman, you have 25 minutes to present.
Okay, that's a lot of time. Let me just share. All right, is my screen visible to you?
Yes.
Right. So essentially, the food security, let me just, I'm going to skip some slides also just to focus more on the broader topic. But let me just offer a simple definition of food security to begin with. Food security has broadly two dimensions, the physical dimension and the economic dimension. And when we mention the physical dimension of food security, we're talking about the availability and access to food in sufficient quantities, whether a country is producing itself or importing.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can you go to the full screen mode?
All right. Let me just do that. Is it better?
Yeah, that's fine now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for pointing it out. So the food security has these two dimensions, the physical dimension and the economic dimension. And when I say economic dimension, physical dimension is the availability, the production, and the access to the food in sufficient quantities. And a second is the economic dimension, which is mainly about the affordability. Therefore, it boils down to the level of income in a country, whether the purchasing power of the vast majority of people have the financial capacity to pay and for the food they consume or not. So when we say that, let's say a country or a population or a segment of the population is food insecure, we may mean either in physical sense, not having enough food, or in an economic sense, having enough food, but not having the ability to buy the food, largely due to the poverty. There are various measures then to measure, and as Sustainable Development Goals, this is well represented in terms of elimination of hunger, but also getting rid of malnutrition of all types. And the two indicators which are normally used, prevalence of undernourishment, and the second is a food security experience scale. The first one, POU, is talks about, in simple words, in terms of the dietary caloric intake of the food which is needed for a healthy life. And when we say prevalence of undernourishment, we are representing a percentage of population which are undernourished. And second is the FEIES scale, which is more of a experience in terms of it's done on a survey basis when population is asked this question, whether, let's say, over 1 year of time period, you have experienced severe or moderate level of food security. You have missed meals, for instance, for a day or 2 days, etc. So there is a spectrum which they evolve in terms of numbers. So we measure the food security in terms of either POU or FIES. So in Pakistan, there was a major report published by a combination of all the UN agencies led by FAO, but this was before the country updated its household numbers in 2018 and 19. So it marked the food security according to the 2015-16 data. The data was subsequently updated. So I've used in the slides the updated data. So it suggests that, according to FAO, 12% Pakistanis are food insecure in terms of undernourishment. When we talk about FAIS, the other scale, I think the food insecurity may increase. And in the long-term period, over the long term, Pakistan has registered an improvement in food security. And as this graph can hopefully show, the FIES graph is showing how food security improves as the percentage, as the income level change, which is intuitive. But I think perhaps more interesting from this for this platform, for this forum today, is when we look at Pakistan's performance, relative performance in eradicating or in overcoming food security as compared with the world and as compared with the region. So the blue lines is showing over last 20 years, Pakistan has improved in the access to food security, and the dark red line dot is the level of the world in terms of food security. So the percentage is like a percentage of the population which are undernourished, and the orange is the regional number. So Pakistan is certainly below the world level, but not too bad in terms of the regional countries. Now, there are various, of course, in each country. I would say that food security would be measured by certain food baskets, right? So whatever we consume, whatever the vast majority of the population consumes, and so this food basket, so to speak, represents the food which a Pakistani average household consume. And as you can see, there are the like top 5 or 6 items include milk, wheat, vegetables, and vegetable oil, and rice, and also chicken, the poultry meat the Pakistani households use. And so these items constitutes about 70% of the food basket. So when we are measuring food security as far as Pakistani market and household is concerned, we are looking at these items, both from the production point of view and also from the price point of view. And in my when I was reviewing the food security situation, especially last year, I had looked at mainly from a inflation point of view, price inflation, because the vast majority of the population, let's say Pakistan on average, the average income is about $1,500 US, and although there are segments which are doing very well, but a vast majority remains poor or under $2 income level. So the price level of these food items directly affects the level of food security, even though they might be available in sufficient quantities, either in the country or outside the country when we talk about food security in terms of regional cooperation. Various estimates were done in last year in Pakistan, including by PIDE, Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, UNDP, FAO itself. And the FAO estimate, which is mentioned here, was done in the very last month of 2020. It was released in December 2020. So it's quite recent data in terms of food security during the pandemic. And although it included Pakistan in a list of 45 countries which needed some kind of external assistance, but the report said that severe food shortages can be localized. So it is not widespread across the population. And my paper argues that thanks to some timely measures by the government, as well as the wide social support, social networks, philanthropic networks, I think Pakistan more or less averted a sort of a national food crisis during the pandemic year. Having said that, of course, poverty remains a long-term issue, and it could not be just addressed by giving aid in one time of the year. So that coupled with the high level of inflation has caused distress and has taken a good amount of the income of the households, consumer income of the households in this year. And particularly as Pakistanis, we recall that the price of wheat, the staple food, shot up considerably throughout 2020. There were like administrative issues. Pakistan has been importing wheat now for a number of years because it doesn't produce enough wheat for its own consumption. However, the timing of the import matters, and at a time when probably the wrong crop estimates and slowed decision making by the government, the sufficient quantity of the wheat was not available in the country, which led to price hike and a significant crisis in terms of the food availability, which was then later on government actually corrected some of this and started allowing the import of wheat as well as sugar. Some numbers in terms of the 70% of the food basket, which I mentioned earlier. On average, the food inflation in the urban areas remained about 17.57%, and in rural it was 21%. So you can imagine that it is pretty high price inflation that was registered, and especially in a few items which most of the households in Pakistan consume. Talking about the regional cooperation aspect, some of it here, one could see that in items such as onion, the price was actually on a decreasing trend because the imports from Iran and Afghanistan were allowed. Historically, ever since Pakistan opened the border with India on the Wagah border, which is next in Lahore, just for international audience, of course, we have enjoyed smooth imports of vegetables like onion, tomato, and from India. But as in last few years, because of security situation and because of the tensions between the two countries, that import had significantly fallen down. In fact, has halted practically. So Pakistan was exploring other options of importing sources for pulses. Pakistan imports a lot of pulse for its population and other vegetables. So that was not sufficient. You can imagine the size of India and the sort of basket which it presents. And in comparison, Iran and Afghanistan were not able to perhaps fulfill that level of demand. So, and also there were some local factors last year. In addition to COVID related restrictions, there were local issues. For instance, the tomato crop in Pakistan was seriously damaged, which reduced the local supply. And at the same time, as during the COVID also, we saw some restrictions in the process, slowness in the slowing down of the process of the import, which affected the food supply. Overall, this is I'm just added this slide from a South-South perspective or global perspective. The food trade has been on a significant rise, as you can see in this data available. Within the Southeast Asia, this is almost touching $60 billion US. In South Asia, it is about $25 billion. And in East Asia is also about $60 billion. So food trade represents an important portion of the overall trade within the regions. Now, this is very interesting. This shows Pakistan vegetable imports from South Asian countries over last 10 years, although the data was not, updated data was not available for this presentation. But as you can see, this big peak, which the top gray line in case of this is the India, this is the Indian exports to Pakistani market. It peaked in 2014 at about $400 million, and then gradually and significantly decreased to about $160 million in last couple of years. Some of it was made up by imports from Afghanistan, but both countries have a different sort of crop pattern, and so it was not sufficient perhaps for growing Pakistani needs. I think we see the problem which lack of regional cooperation can bring in terms of the food security for the households in the region. Just experience sharing from Pakistan again, when the crisis in terms of food prices was significantly noted last year. Government was taking some steps. Earlier last year in 2020, there was a locust attack, and that also in the province of Sindh particularly, which is the region where a lot of pulses are grown, also vegetables are grown. So it affected the production. Yes, excuse me. So government announced some emergency measures and effectively controlled the outbreak. Pakistani government typically resorts to price control measures through administrative means, strict enforcement, monitoring. Although in my paper I have argued that this is always a temporary measure and it doesn't help, and Pakistan being a federation should allow free movements of food items like wheat and other important items across the country and even across the borders also. But because the current law requires permission from the central government to make these movements smooth, a lot of bureaucratic redundancies and inertia actually slows down the process, and it leads to a severity of food security crisis. And although government eventually allowed the import of wheat, but a lot of time was wasted in the decision making, and my view is that if there was, let's say, this permission was not needed, then private sector could have imported just for its own self-interest, looking at the shortage of the wheat to maintain the supply of wheat in the country. So while government was offering some relief packages to the best of its capacity, but it was never enough in terms of reaching out the entire population. Government of Pakistan is also trying to improve its capacity to, like in terms of digital solutions, better data access, etc. Use of ICT in monitoring of the situation. It has shown some results, I must say, but I think in large part policy it remains unchanged, and the thrust of the policy is that you can improve the food inflation, you can reduce the food inflation and improve food security by better enforcement through better use of data. Yes, that's one part of the equation, but as long as as long as the price control remains a function of the government agency only, I think the problem will remain as it is. And in fact, my Pakistani friends would be aware that they very recently, just last week, I think, the government, federal government for that matter, denotified all the price committees which are supposed to monitor the situation of food security and food prices, and now they are going to set up new committees. So not sure if this is going to be helpful to improve the food security. I've also made some recommendations that yes, in the short run, the government and the private sector should be collaborating, especially making sure that the food can be made available in areas where it is needed the most. But in the long term, I think what needs to happen is, this is of course very Pakistan specific recommendation, that food security remains, so this is the anomaly. The agriculture as a subject of the Federation is a provincial subject. But the food security, there is a federal Ministry of Food Security. And although some kind of coordination is needed across the provinces to manage the supply and demand, but if there are different or opposing political governments in different provinces, as the case right now in Pakistan, then that political situation can negatively affect the bureaucratic decision making. So I've essentially argued that we need to move towards open and free trade across borders. I think Pakistan and Pakistani households and Indian farmers and households were better off when the food trade was open and without any hindrance, and now they're worse off. I cannot attribute the current crisis in Indian case to this situation. There are local dynamics there, but I would not rule out the possibility of Pakistan being, Pakistan is a large market that might have played some role there. So it's better off for both farmers and households, consumers, to let that trade happen. And at the same time, I think we have seen in case of Pakistan that in cases where it has introduced positive incentives for private sector investment in the agriculture, for instance, in the milk processing in the past, in meat processing most in recent years, they have seen the results. So private sector has entered the agriculture, has invested in the field, has improved the capacity, has improved the distribution system, and as a result has increased the, improved the access of the product, food products to a vast number of population at competitive prices. So I think this is where we need to go in terms of improving food security. We need to open up the trade. We need to open up the investment in the agriculture. Many years ago, Pakistan announced this what is called corporate agriculture investment programs, but unfortunately, it wasn't implemented, except maybe very restricted examples. In case of Pakistan, we have this potential of helping not only just its own population, but also the population around the region and the world to contribute towards maintaining food supply and improving the food security situation. So I think in that respect, the idea of South-South cooperation and regional cooperation for enhancement of food security is vital, and hopefully today's discussion can lead further into this direction. I finish my presentation here. Farhan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ali Salman. Our executive director unfortunately had to run for another important engagement, so the responsibility of moderation has been shifted to me. So on behalf of ComStats, I would like to really thank you for taking time out from your schedule to deliver this very important lecture. And as you rightly mentioned, that because of various factors, including inflation, price hike, shortage of supplies, and others, food security has become an even bigger problem to cope with for the developing countries during the pandemic. And we are grateful to you for sharing your insights on these issues. I must also acknowledge the Democracy Reporting International, which is based here in Pakistan, which has facilitated this lecture. And of course, your presentation, like you said, is based on a publication brought out by Democracy Reporting International, which was entitled Food Security in Pakistan during the pandemic year. So thank you very much, and I'm sure that your presentation will generate a lot of questions from the focal ministries of the member countries and some other centers of excellence who are also working in the areas of food technologies. So, but I would request the participants to kindly restrict their questions to 5 minutes because we started the session late, and then we will move to the next speaker from Palestine. So the floor is now open for question and answer and discussions, please.
May I come in?
Yes, madam, please go ahead.
Yeah, let me first and foremost say thank you to Ali Salman, who, as I said earlier, was my study mate at the Institute of Social Studies. So Salman, wow. Congratulations. This is Cynthia from Ghana.
Oh, hello, Cynthia. Wow, what a pleasant surprise to hear you.
Yeah. Good. I think this issue of food security and the COVID pandemic is very, very relevant in our times. What I did not hear, but I think these are things that we could all pencil and look at solutions going forward, is the fact that, for instance, in Ghana, there was artificial shortages that were created due to the lockdown. There was a rush to buy food and store, which automatically caused prices to soar up and some of the staple and basic foods. Whilst the government's slogan had been planting for food and jobs, for which reason there were a lot of food in the hinterland, again, the lockdown caused these food to be locked up in the villages and in the farms and creating shortages in the cities. There's little that was in the city. The rich rushed, bought them and kept them under the lockout. Government tried what they call the food security and food banks, where they have stores of food. However, there are restrictions in movement. And so I can imagine that these things might have also happened in some of our other countries. COVID has taught us a lot of lessons. All of us were looking forward, especially in Ghana, that come 2021, things will ease up. Unfortunately, it appears the COVID is becoming more ugly in 2021 in Ghana than it was in 2020. This means that we don't know what lies ahead of us. And therefore, my question to all of us is, how do we prepare? What are the steps we need to take? What kind of storage facilities are we talking about? What kind of food, in terms of security, are we looking at? What processes? Because as you rightly said, we're not only talking about availability, we are also talking about affordability and nutrition. And so I just want to bring this to the table, that this is about the time that our scientists and all of us start thinking of how are we going to produce and store and make sure that these things can be distributed. Are we going to have food tablets, for instance, where I take a tablet and it's nourished and I can stay for days? So these are the things I think all of us as scientists and as developing countries, we should be looking at, not only planting more, but the processes and the storages and the distribution. So I just want to bring it to the table for us to not go back and relax, but continue to research and think. Thank you again, Ali, for the presentation.
Thank you, Cynthia. This was wonderful. Should I respond or should I wait for a couple of? I can.
Is there any other question so that Mr. Salman could address both of those questions together because of the shortage of time? Mr. Salman, please go ahead.
Well, thank you, Cynthia. It's great always to hear from a old former classmate, and I think you're absolutely right. You have added new dimensions to the topic, especially use of technology. I'd like to add here in terms of food storage and food distribution networks. I mean, apart from the rules and policies in our countries, I can say, of course, certainly for Pakistan, that 20 to 25% of the food produced is wasted, because we do not have a sufficient and high quality storage and transportation network. And that's huge. And therefore, in my recommendation, as I have emphasized that, we need to bring more investment in these sectors of food security. And this could be cross-border, and maybe a country within let's say the member countries of this bloc has better capacity to build in storage and transport facilities. So such cooperation can always lead and yield positive results. I think there's a lot to be sort of saved in terms of by use of better technologies, which is not happening at the moment.
So are there any further questions from the participants? If not, then we will thank Mr. Ali Salman once again for his very comprehensive lecture. And if the participants have any further questions or feedback, please feel free to write to us, and we will convey your feedback to Mr. Ali Salman for exchange and collaborations in future. So with this, it is my pleasure to introduce our second speaker, who is Engineer Hussein, who is the Director General of Technical Education at the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research of Palestine. And the lecture is entitled Science, Technology and Innovation to Address COVID-19 in Palestine. Engineer Salman, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. My voice is clear, first of all.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting us for this lecture. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to participate in this series sessions, especially the sixth lecture titled Science and Technology in COVID-19 and Beyond. Thank you also for Dr. Ali Salman for his very positive and constructive lecture about food security, which is one of the main challenges in the world before the crisis and during the crisis, and I think it will also need to be analyzed more after we pass, inshallah, the crisis peacefully. Anyway, I want to share my presentation before I start. Is it clear now? I hope that you can see the first slide, Science and Technology and Innovation to Address COVID-19 in Palestine. Okay, I work for the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research as the General Director of Technical Education. And actually, we you know that from the start of the crisis, which was started first in China, more than 220 million tertiary students were suddenly disrupted due to the COVID-19 driven university closures. Now, you know that many countries started to use the vaccine and to try to make some precautions in order to avoid more infections. And currently, most of the higher education institutions around the world are preparing for safe reopening by altering their normal schedules, plans, and organization at the institutional or national levels. In response to the official Palestinian government decisions to limit the spread of coronavirus, which started actually in Palestine from the city of tourism. It was Bethlehem. You know, there are many religious places for pilgrims to visit, and the start of Corona was there through the tourism gate. And the education institutions have moved Palestinian higher education institutions from face-to-face learning to e-learning or distance learning during the second semester of the academic year 1920. Now, our statistics for the year 90 indicates that there are 52 higher education institutions, 15 are traditional universities, and we have 2 open universities, 17 university colleges, and 18 community colleges. The number of workers, we are talking about the academic and the administrative individuals, they are estimated around 23,000, and the number of students are estimated to be 280,000 students in all these institutions. And as you know, these students are enrolled in various disciplines in all these institutions, and they have to stop or they cannot access their institutions, and due to that we have to think of an innovative way in order to ensure the continuity of educational process, as well as all the higher education institutions in the world. And we have made some contact with the let's say institutions in Europe, in Malaysia, and other countries, to see how to change experiences and how did they deal with this closure. The transition from face-to-face learning to e-learning was a challenge for all education institutions, especially those that its reliance on e-learning has not been significantly over the previous years. You know that some education institutions, they relied heavily on face-to-face learning, while some institutions used blended learning, which combines the e-learning tools and means and the face-to-face in various degrees or varying degrees. The crisis management and transformation to e-learning was actually not easy. And how did we know that? We have conducted a study. It is about the effectiveness of the distance or e-learning from the point of view of instructors and the students after the first semester of Corona crisis finished. And of course, we asked many questions through many paragraphs in certain aspects. It is about the transition to e-learning and within a reasonable time frame. And also, we asked the instructors and students about the appropriate means and tools availability for e-learning. Of course, we asked the students, we asked the instructors as well, and we asked also the institution. They also whether the skills needed to deal with the technological, let's say, equipment or applications available for e-learning. It is acquired by the instructors or by the students themselves, and also whether the educational objectives are achieved through the e-learning in these 3 or 4 months. And also we asked about the assessment tools, because the assessment issue was very, very important, because you know you have to deal with the students and to assess them far away. You cannot access them directly, and especially for practical subjects or courses. Now, of course, because of the crisis, some of technical support methods were adopted by Palestinian universities. It was an announcement of crisis cell for technical support for professors facing difficulties and for students as well, and publishing awareness and educational videos for staff and students, promoting the e-learning culture, integrating lecturers and training them in some electronic and dealing skills with applications, selection of volunteers from each college to be reference for the lecturers and the students who need help, and also forming special groups for lecturers on social media with the aim of discussing other related challenges and suggested solutions. Also, we conducted on the national level and also on the institutional level an online courses for lecturers and orientation also for students who wishing to learn more about applications and platforms. Now, regarding students, many of lecturers and students also indicated that there is a lack of the means of logistics required to conduct the distance learning process. Of course, they talked about laptops, smartphones, and also, as well as in every country, the availability of internet services in remote areas. Palestine is not a big country like, for example, India or Pakistan, but also yet we have some constraints regarding the quality of the e-learning, of the internet connection and communication, because you know that we have a political situation here and Israel controls all the frequencies for Palestine, and to also to introduce the fourth and fifth generation of communication. So the e-learning showed that there is an economic and social differences between the students and their ability to access technologies. Now, this appeared very clear in this crisis. Now, our study, despite the fact that the Zoom application is the most used and effective one, it showed, as you can see in this, let's say, graph, the green line indicates that what is the most techniques used during the crisis. The blue line indicates which one was most effective. We asked a sample from the institutions, sample of students, sample of instructors, and as you can see, most of them most of them used the Zoom, let's say, communication platform or technique, and they thought that it is the most effective one. Moodle, whereas it is one of the widespread, let's say, learning management system. It is a learning management system very common in the world. They think that it was used mostly, but it was not effective. And we think that this is because the instructors and students, they were introduced to Moodle very fast, and they were not well trained to use this learning management system. Of course, as you can see, some of the instructors and students used the social communication platforms, WhatsApp, YouTube, Google Meet, Skype, etc. So as you can see that there is a value of using these techniques, and you know that the Zoom, for example, lecture ends after 40 minutes because it is a free version, and so some institutions they initiated the accounts for their lecturers to swift or to promote the education process very easily. Now, also we can see that some of students said, okay, we use the distance learning techniques, but they are not efficient in practical training, and that's why we tried to make the practical courses at the institutions with some let's say precaution measures with the Ministry of Health, so they can go to their institutions to make some experiments in the labs, etc. But of course, we can see that here the technology did not work well with transition to distance learning. Now, the distance education is one of the solutions that countries used in order to confront the spread of corona. The traditional education is indispensable, but the integration of the technological process and distance education significantly in emergency circumstances give a competence advantage to the educational process, as smart technology has become one of the most important tools for crisis management. With what it possesses, it is able to save time and effort. Of course, we made some cooperation and collaboration with some institutions or some donors who supports, let's say, education in general and technical and vocational education in particular, because, as I said before, that the practical courses was a challenge to be conducted. And we succeeded on publishing a project. It is about TVET Online. As you can see on the screen, this is one of the institutions. They have their courses. They used the model, but it was customized for the institutions, and it has a full, let's say, support, technical support from a company, worldwide known company that works in this aspect, because the availability of educational platforms is one of the basics that must be found in any learning system. Under the shadow, the transition of Palestinian education systems from face-to-face learning to e-learning had to be provided convenient platforms if not available. This was one of the recommendations of the study that we have conducted. And the study said also that about 77% of the lecturers and 50% of the students said they believe that education institutions provided the tools and professional platforms to enable e-learning, but yet they need more training on use these platforms. And when we say that 50% of the students said that the educational institution provided the tools, this means that there is also 50% who did not provide any kind of these tools. And that's why we made this project. And now it is online, and they are using this platform. Of course, we are also working with other partners on some, let's say, frameworks. It is the NEECE EdTech Maturity Framework. And this model helps academic and training institutions to understand where they are in their technology strategy and plan the next stages of their technology strategy, and record and evaluate their progress. This framework, which we think it is very, very important to recognize how much the institutions are ready to use the technology to address all let's say, emergency situations like Corona. We think we will need to discuss more about this and to endorse this framework, because we think that it is not the matter of Corona, it is the matter of beyond the Corona, and whether the institutions will be always ready to face any kind of crisis and emergency. This framework, of course, it has been in existence for over 20 years and updated to reflect the changing scene of technology institutions. It talks about leadership and management, teaching and learning with technology, assessment of digital capability, digital safeguarding, professional development, and resources and technology. These are the main elements. It is divided in 6 elements, 13 stands, and 56 aspects. And here you can see how it was, let's say, the details of each one of these 6 elements. For example, if we are talking about the teaching and learning with technology, we are talking about teaching with technology and learning with technology. If we are talking about the digital safeguarding, we are talking about protection, education, and safe and secure use by others. Also, we think that the institutions that could overcome the crisis very easy is those whose, let's say, individuals have acquired the necessary digital skills. I mean that if the students and instructors have, before the crisis, some competencies regarding the dealing with technology, it was easier for them to let's say, to transfer to digital, to e-learning very easily. For example, the competency areas we are talking about: information and data, collaboration, communication, content creation, protection and security, digital environment. And that's why we are now thinking of, let's say, establishing a kind of a platform that assess and develop and integrate the digital skills into the curricula of the colleges. Here, as you can see, there was some initiatives from, let's say, a university. It's called Al-Quds University. It is based on an entirely innovative design of a medical artificial respirator. You know that during the corona crisis, the availability of these artificial respirators could save many lives. And this university and other also institutions worked hard through scientific research in order to, let's say, invent these medical artificial respirators to save lives as well. And this respirator actually was endorsed by the Palestinian Standard Institution and by the Ministry of Health as well. Other also innovation was this turbo sterilizer. It was invented by two students from the higher education institution. They are two engineers, brothers. It contains two tanks with a capacity of 300 liters, quantity sufficient to sterilize a distance of 4 kilometers distance. This was, let's say, in a very short time period of invention, but as you can see, it has some kind of technology in its working, and it has an electric, let's say, panel, as you can see in the photos. Also, a Palestinian engineer invented a simple alarm device attached to a shirt that sounds an alarm if the wearer approaches a distance of less than 1 meter. You know that the social distancing was very important, and this is the recommendation of the World Health Organization. This Corona Smart Medal has wireless charging for smartphones and a hand sanitizer package that works automatically using a sensor. So we can see that obviously that the technology is very important in the crisis, especially in this pandemic. A lot of inventions and the technology used in the sanitation process, in let's say to address COVID-19. Because I have a limited time, I cannot talk a lot about all these inventions, but we know that the community contribution is very important, especially the higher education institutions, the technology, the innovation, and also, let's say, the science is very important, and the science is the key word that will save lives, especially in corona crisis. The countries who have this technology and good science, they can pass this faster than other countries, as we can see very clear. Thank you for listening for me, and I hope that I could address some of the interventions in Palestine.
Thank you very much, Engineer Salman Hussein, for your very comprehensive presentation regarding how the Palestinian government addressed the challenges posed by COVID-19, especially in the higher education sector, and also by for sharing the innovations undertaken by Palestine in various other sectors. I'm sure this will be very helpful for other participating countries. So with this, the floor is open for question and answers and discussions.
Farhan,
Yes, Professor
can I
Pasarka.
ask a question?
Yes, Professor, please go ahead.
Yes, I enjoyed very much your talk, and we have similar plans and projects in Colombia. But one of the things that we are trying to push here is to create small companies, small industries, spin-offs to produce medical devices and medical equipment, ventilators, and all kind of that type of product. Do you have similar plans in Palestine? Because I think it's important to use this pandemic to create a new kind of industrial sector in our countries. So are you planning to promote the creation of industries or the production of these goods by traditional industry?
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, the promoting of startups in general was taking place and was promoted by the Palestinian government even before the crisis. And we have many, let's say, incubators at the higher institutions themselves, and they have some kind of partnership with the companies and with the private sector. And we know that a lot of let's say investors looking forward in order to let's say to put money in some let's say successful business areas, and we know that the crisis also was, even though it was a threat, but it was also an opportunity for some companies to work in this matter, and that's why we see that the incubators and the higher education institutions and the companies, the private sector, and let's say the companies working in health and in electronic and technology, they work together in order to first of all to save lives, to have let's say technology that is needed to overcome this crisis, and as well to work after the crisis in this matter of business. Some new companies have appeared, and some other companies unfortunately were closed because of this crisis. And so it is the matter of the government to see how can it let's say convert the crisis from a threat to opportunity. This is a matter of policies in the country.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Can I ask a question? My name is Wahomina from Ghana, the director of Science, Technology and Policy Research Institute. I want to find out from the presenter, what has been the role of the private sector again, especially in infrastructure building in the area of the e-learning and the skills development in education? Because as you can see, this crisis has opened up a lot of opportunities for the ICT players, especially for the private sector. So if now we have numbers of students having to hook onto e-platforms for learning, what are they also doing to meet the government's halfway in building the infrastructure base for the potential users? Thank you.
Actually, this is a very good question, and we all know that the government and the public institutions could not work alone without the participation of the private sector. As I said in my presentation, one of the main challenges in higher education sector is the coverage and also the quality of internet speed, let's say, services. And because of that, the Ministry of Telecom and Telecommunication and Technologies in Palestine contacted the private sector, we call them the internet service providers, in order to ask them to increase the speeds free for the students and for the lecturers as well, and also to support them with any kind of means needed in this aspect. And fortunately, they responded very fast, and they increased the speed, and also they enhanced the quality for free for the students and for the lecturers as well, in order to enable them to continue their study without any difficulties. Also, I would also say that some of the private sector educational institutions, they supported the students with the, let's say, means of e-learning devices, smartphones, some of tablets for their students, in order also to enable them to continue their studies. And also some of institutions, let's say, granted laptops for the students as well. And of course, the participation of the private sector did not end at this point. It also supported the scientific research. I'm telling you that some of the commercial banks works in Palestine supported scientific research, especially in corona aspect, and how to overcome the corona, and what kind of technology can we use in order to limit the spread of corona in Palestine.
Are there any further questions, please?
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes, please, go ahead.
I am Mohammed Mahjoub Hassan from Sudan. Thank you to the two presenters about of the two topics. My question is, can we get accurate short-term forecast of corona cases and death? I mean, through modeling of transmission of coronavirus. Through maybe to develop mathematical model for COVID-19. This one question. The other question, I want to know the contribution in terms of the scientific research, in terms of clinical trial, like medicinal plants in Palestine, and or another activities of scientific research to combat COVID-19. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for the question. Regarding your first part, do we have a forecasting model? Actually, I'm not a specialist in, let's say, in medicine or forecasting models in general, but yes, some of institutions here in Palestine, they have made a kind of forecasting models for the spread of coronavirus. And also, I know that some of the countries nearby, for example, I saw a full report in Egypt. They made a kind of forecasting model of the spread and the curve of the coronavirus spread and control in the country. And I think that these models are effective to expect where are we going and how can we control this disease. And their expectations were very close to what happened in reality. So yes, there is forecasting models, and as I told you before, it is a forecasting model, so it is not very accurate, but it is very close to what we expect. And we can see that the spread of the coronavirus in every country is changing depending on the culture of the country and how did they deal with this coronavirus. The easiest way to control the virus is to close everything. But the best way is not to close, but to hand with the coronavirus without closing, because you know the effect of closing is it's a disaster on the economical situation in any country, especially in some economies that are let's say not very strong, like developed countries. Regarding your second question, it was, can you remind me? The second part is about
scientific research. Yeah.
Yeah, scientific research. We know that the humanity can pass this crisis only through scientific research, and we know that from the first day of the crisis, all the countries, especially the institutions that have what we call a medicine colleges and the medicine scientific research and companies that works in scientific research in medicine, worked very hard in order to invent the vaccine. In Palestine, unfortunately, we don't have what we call a specialized scientific research center in medicine, but we have a very few medicine colleges, and they work hard in order to control the pandemic, and they work closely with the government in order to give recommendations on how to deal with the spread of the virus in each area. And that's why the government started to close some areas in some cities, in some districts, and it keep it open in other districts. And also the government, let's say, supported in some way the scientific research regarding this issue. But of course, we do not have, let's say, a very specialized medicine research centers like what is in Germany or in America.
Thank you so much indeed.
Can I please add just a few words?
Yes, Professor Ona, please go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. Let me use this opportunity to thank the presenter for a well-documented presentation. Thank you very much. The presentation was quite illustrative and informative. I just wanted to comment on the last bit of the question about the mathematical modeling in respect of the COVID-19 spread. Just to inform this platform that the National Mathematical Center here in Abuja, Nigeria, has been very active in that area. And we are currently working on various aspects, mathematical model and simulation on various aspects of COVID-19 pandemic, from the aspect of the spread, the rate of spread, to the economic impact. And we are actually currently collaborating with also other members of the Centers of Excellence of ComSat. And I think it is also informative to inform that we just presented one of our papers in this area with the CCCS of ComSat, that is the Center for Climate Studies for the ComSat. So what, in essence, I'm saying is that, yes, active work is going on from the mathematical point of view, both deterministic and stochastic. And so, we are currently in the process of establishing an international group, which we are drawing from other members of the of COMSAT. So I want to use this to inform members of the platform and to thank once again the COMSAT headquarters for sustaining this discourse. It is quite informative and it's giving all of us a lot of information on how we can collaborate, where we can collaborate, and the areas that we are working at our various centers of excellence. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Professor Ona, for your comments, and we are indeed appreciative of the work being done by NMC in the area of mathematical modeling. And thank you for recalling that NMC is leading COMSAT's International Thematic Research Group on mathematical modeling, and the participants can consider joining this group for collaborative research and development activities from the platform of COMSATs. Are there any further questions from Engineer Samir or Mr. Ali Salman? If not, then we would once again thank both of the speakers very much for their excellent presentations, and we are really happy that they touched upon two very important areas that have been affected by COVID-19, which are higher education and food security, and we are indeed very happy to learn about the perspectives of Palestine and Pakistan with regard to how their governments are coping with the challenges posed by this pandemic. And next week, we will be back with presentation of the Executive Director of Alliance of International Science Organizations, ANSO, which is based in China, who would be giving a presentation on the topic of South-South and Triangular Cooperation, and would be sharing his insights in this regard. So we once again thank both of the speakers and the distinguished participants for their presence during this session, and we hope that you found this session productive and fruitful, and we will be back next week. Thank you very much. It's goodbye from now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Good afternoon.
Goodbye.
All right.